Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Think Suburbia, the podcast of the Suburban Virginia Republican Coalition, the SUVGOP. So glad you can join us for this latest Zoom podcast. My name is Mike Ginsberg. I am one of the founders and one of the co-hosts of the SUVGOP's podcasts.
And I'm Jill Cook. I'm another one of the founders of SUVGOP and the co-host of the podcast series. And I want to welcome our guest today, Jack Wilson, who is the chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia and candidate for re-election for chairman. So Jack, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mike and Jill. It's great to be with you. Look forward to it.
Great, excellent. So tell us a little bit about your background, your political background and professionally, and how you got involved in politics.
Sure. Well, I'll give you a quick overview. I'm married. My wife and I are going to celebrate our 38th anniversary later this month.
All right.
We
Congratulations.
have four wonderful kids. And while I might be biased, I think I've got the 6 greatest granddaughters in the world. So that's sort of the family. I was an Army brat, so I grew up all over the country. My parents were originally from West Virginia. And so that's where I went to college as an undergraduate. I went to West Virginia University and got my degree there in political science, stayed and got a master's degree in business administration. While there, I was in ROTC. So I then went from college to active duty. I was an Army officer in Germany for 4 years in an infantry division, a medical platoon leader. And then after that, went to law school in New York, and then settled in Chesterfield County right after graduating from law school. So started with a large firm in Richmond, and then started my own practice a little over 12 years ago in Chesterfield. So that's a quick overview of about 40 years right there.
No, that's great. That's great. Now you were, go ahead. I'm sorry, Jill.
I was going to say, so how did you move on to the political career?
Sure. Well, I've always been active and interested in politics. In fact, when I was at West Virginia University, I was president of the College Republicans there at a time when West Virginia was a very blue state. It now is a very red state, and I take full credit for that. It was based on the groundwork I laid there. So, but then, was active as soon as I got to Chesterfield County, I got involved with the Chesterfield County Committee early on, ultimately was elected chairman of the Chesterfield County Committee in 2000, served on the State Central Committee at the time from the 7th District until I got redistricted into the 4th, and then became district chair when Randy Forbes was the congressman in the 4th and served as the district chair for I think 10 years at least, and then was just elected chairman not quite 2 years ago by the State Central Committee to fill an unexpired term.
Right. Now you filled that unexpired term, and one of the questions I had was what prompted you to step up to become chairman when that vacancy hit? I guess it was John Whitbeck resigned to run for Loudoun County Supervisor or chair.
Chair, yeah. John stepped down, and frankly, a couple of the leaders and longtime members of the State Central Committee came to me and asked if it would be something I'd be interested in doing. And the thought was that I could perhaps bridge some of the gaps that existed in State Central, the various factions, and try to bring the party together. And I recognized that the party was sort of at a crossroads. We needed to start doing some things differently. We needed to pull together to win. And so I said, well, I'm jumping right into the middle of a breach here because the midterms were just coming up, but I thought it was the right thing to do for the party. I had the background, the experience to do it, and it's been a wonderful experience.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I guess, obviously having done it for a year and a half, now you're running for a full term. What is it that you would like to accomplish in the full term? And maybe preface that with, what would you consider your accomplishments from the last 18 months that you've served? And what are the things you would like to do going forward if you're elected to a full term?
Sure. Well, one of the things, again, we need to do as a party is come together. We still have to be able to be unified as a party. And the message that I've been communicating since I've been chairman, whether it's at a large committee meeting all the way down to a small women's club dinner or luncheon, is that we've got to get past the internal fighting after we have a nominee. Obviously, we can have our contested nomination fights, and they can be very spirited and they can be energetic and they're helpful to the party because I think it gives us new ideas. But we need to learn how to come back together finished with those and all work on the same team to get our nominee elected. And so that's really the initial thing I wanted to get started as chairman, and clearly want to continue that, because we've still been losing elections when we don't come back together after a nominating contest. And so that's the first thing. But really, what I saw becoming chairman were a number of the things that we needed to do better as a party. John Whitbeck had sort of taken over the party in a place where it was in debt. Fundraising was abysmal, and John, while he was chairman, was able to turn some of those things around, and I wanted to build on that, and I think we have. And we're continuing to do that. Really, again, I'd mentioned I've been a district chair, been on state central committee in the past, but there's so many things you don't know about the Republican Party of Virginia until you're actually the chairman. So you're the one making the fundraising calls. So you're the one dealing with the press, until you're the one dealing with all the various issues that arise within the party. So it takes a while to understand what being the chairman of the Republican Party is about. And you need to have that background of how does the party work, I think, before you can do that.
Yeah, there is a lot going on. There are a lot of things that you contend with that we don't see because you are dealing with them. So, we really appreciate that. I wanted to ask, as far as not just the candidates in the party, but the voters in the party. Okay, we as the Suburban Virginia Republican Coalition are very concerned about the exodus of suburban voters. That has been a pattern, 2017, 18, 19, and it's not just here in Virginia. It's across the country. And I'm sure that's a concern of yours because Virginia has quite a few major suburban areas. So why do you think they've been leaving the party, and what do you think that we can do to win them back in Virginia?
Well, I think really what we need to revert back to is recognize that the Republican Party nationally and the Republican Party in Virginia has had its greatest success when it's been a big tent party. When we recognize that we have differing viewpoints within the party. Now, of course, we have bedrock issues that we stand for, but we need to recognize that voters in Fairfax and voters in Chesterfield and voters in Virginia Beach see the issues differently than perhaps voters in Southwest Virginia and in some of our rural areas. And so we need to recognize, to be successful, we all need to be part of the same team and under the big tent. And so when we become too issue driven on some of the issues that suburban voters aren't with us on, we need to allow our candidates in those areas to be a little bit more representative of the constituencies that they represent or are hoping to represent. And frankly, I think social media has done us wrong in that, because we have activists in one part of the state really hitting on elected officials or candidates in other parts of the state. But we need to be a big tent. And I think that's really the fundamental way we get back to winning elections again, is recognizing the diversity in the party.
I love that. And I use, people who know me have heard me use this before. What you described is what a former precinct captain described to me. And I love this term, situational awareness. Okay. That, the suburbs are not the city or not the rural areas. They're all different, and targeted messaging and support of the candidates that do use that targeted messaging, I think, is what you're talking about. We need to support how those candidates choose to campaign in their particular areas. That's an excellent point.
Well, and that's it. And again, I'll use the example. I think, for the across the board, Republicans support the Second Amendment, but a candidate in Southwest Virginia can be far more vocal and far more energetic about their support of the Second Amendment than perhaps a candidate in Fairfax can be. Now, it doesn't mean that the candidate in Fairfax ain't going to support the Second Amendment, but that might not be their message to their voters. They may want to be able to focus more on transportation issues and school issues and other pocketbook issues, as opposed to a campaign driven solely on the Second Amendment, even though that candidate in Northern Virginia might be a strong Second Amendment supporter. That just ain't going to be the message. And we need to allow for that if we're going to win again.
Right. Now, another, obviously one component of winning elections is having important issues to run on. And as you suggest, having those issues marry up with the electorate and the concerns of the electorate. Of course, another element of winning elections are the candidates. You have to have a really compelling candidate, I think, to win. One of the challenges we have faced is recruiting candidates. And I know there's, been talk, we didn't, compete in all these districts and so forth. how would you, as chair, if you're elected to a full term as chair, how would you go about recruiting candidates, and particularly in areas where we have faced challenges, the suburban areas? How would you go about finding candidates that would appeal to those electorates that, like we said, maybe backing away from the Republican Party?
Well, and again, we need to recognize that running candidates is a strategic approach to winning elections. And historically, the Republican Party of Virginia is not the entity that goes out and recruits candidates, for example, for the House of Delegates or the state Senate. Frankly, if the Republican Party of Virginia did that, we'd probably get significant backlash from people that are saying that grassroots activists need to be the ones to identify our local candidates, not a top-down approach from Richmond. But what I would continue to do is work with the House caucus and the Senate caucus. Clearly, next year is a situation where we want to have every position on the ballot covered, because it's a statewide election. And so anything we can do to drive more Republicans to the polling places next year, in support of a House of Delegates candidate that frankly may have a slim chance of winning, but if that candidate can pull out some more Republican votes, it'll help the top of our ticket so that we can win the governor's mansion back and perhaps the lieutenant governor and attorney general. So getting a full team on the field next year is critical. We're going to have a full team on the field this year. We'll have a congressional nominee in every congressional district. We have our United States Senate candidate, and obviously we'll be doing everything we can to win Virginia for President Trump. And that's the approach we're going to use. It's a full team effort, and it'll be the same effort next year. And so I think what we need to do, though, is coordinate closely with the local units. They're the ones that need to identify the candidates that can run in their specific localities.
Right. Are there things RPV can do to sort of help them or support them, particularly, like you say, in places where, it may be harder to recruit candidates because of the odds?
Well, I think what we will do is clearly give access to data for these candidates. We may be in a position, hopefully, to provide some of the basic resources for these candidates that say, look, we're not going to be able to pay for you to go on TV in a district that we're, 70-30 Democrat district. We're not going to probably devote resources to that, but we might be in a position to provide for some of the basic yard signs and bumper stickers and some of the basic things that a candidate would need to run a credible campaign. And I think if the party can provide that, a candidate will say, I recognize that I'm in an uphill climb, but I'm willing to do it because I know I got the party at least supporting me to get me started. And I think we can clearly do that across the board next year.
That's great. That's excellent. That's very good for the candidates. I like your idea of, drawing out the voters, because a voter might come out for their local person and then we get them for the rest of it. I love that. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Yeah. So let's move on. You were chair of the YR, president of the YRs, the CRs in college. Okay, that brings us to a whole subject. What are the challenges of our party with younger voters? And then we will move on to a question right here in Virginia about younger members. But what do you think the biggest challenge is? How do we get this generation to buy into our party?
Well, I'm not sure that they're not at this point. Again, I think we do have great college Republican units in Virginia. We've got great leadership among the CRs. They're expanding their campuses that they're on. And frankly, that's where we need to do it, is at the CR level, support our college Republicans, because they're the ones on the ground working at the various universities and provide whatever the support we can. And we provide the messaging again. But again, I go back to that sort of the Big Ten approach that I talked about earlier. The college Republicans, the YRs, the younger voters have priority issues that are a greater priority than perhaps some of our older Republicans have. And so we need to recognize that when our college Republicans and our young Republicans are moving forward on issues, if they're within the Big Ten of the Republican Party, we need to support that. And so that's really where we do it. And again, I think also a lot of it starts at home. I was the college Republican president at West Virginia. My oldest daughter went to West Virginia as well and was also the president there when she was there.
Really?
So part of it stays within the family too.
All the family.
As well.
That's excellent.
That's great. Raised them well.
That's it.
Right.
No, that's fantastic.
this brings us to our next subject, the amendment that has come up. There's a party plan amendment that has been proposed by a group that would like to significantly change the composition and sort of minimize the contribution of not only the college Republicans and the young Republicans, but the Virginia Federation of Republican Women, of which I'm a member, and we do a heck of a lot of work. Tell us what you think about that.
Yeah, well, and in short, yeah, this is a proposal that would reduce the size of State Central Committee, and in doing so, it slashes the representation of the women's group, the YFRW, the YRs, as well as the college Republicans. And I think that is exactly the wrong approach. Again, I talk about a big tent. You don't grow a big tent by slashing some of your hardest workers and the voices of those workers from the leadership decisions. And so while those on the other side of that proposal would say, well, we're not reducing the voting strength, it isn't about the voting strength. It's really about the voices and the difference in ideas and opinions that a larger, more diverse group brings to the table. And so if we try to minimize the number of voices, we're going to shrink the tent and we will continue to lose. And so frankly, a lot of the more successful state committees around the nation have state central committees that are much larger than ours. And so reducing it, I think, clearly is the wrong way to go, and reducing it by slashing the representation of some of our hardest working affiliated groups is clearly the wrong way to go. So I said no from the beginning when it first came out, and I said no again most recently when it started getting more attention. So I'm a no then, I'm a no now, and I'll be a no at the convention.
Well,
That's a yeah.
As
That's
a
a great point.
VFRW and as Mike, as a former YR and I think we all really appreciate that. Mike, did you want to add something? Because I have another question.
No, I just thought it was, I thought you made an excellent point, and it's one that I hadn't thought of before, because, one of the arguments that has been made in favor as well, we're slashing the number, but we're not necessarily slashing the percentage representation. But in fact, you make a very good point that really the number is really what's important here. It's the number of voices and having that perspective from a diverse set of voices that's really important. So I thought that was a very interesting point.
Yeah, and I believe part of that amendment, correct me if I'm wrong, was also removing the voices of these elected legislative members of Virginia too in the caucus. I believe that was part of it too. What do you think
that's
about
right.
That is part of it too. And again, it's for me, it's simple. Is any proposal a proposal that will enlarge the tent, or is it a proposal that's going to shrink the tent? And if it's a shrink the tent proposal, I'm against it. If it's a grow the tent, I'm in favor of it.
Grow the party, GOP,
No,
grow our party.
right.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point. I guess, one question, obviously there are two other candidates in the chairman's race. One, Mike Scholler, who's the chairman of Lancaster County Republican Committee, and then Rich Anderson, the former delegate, who also ran for delegate in 2019. How would you distinguish yourself? I mean, you don't have to knock them, but maybe how would you distinguish yourself as a candidate, why you should be the elected chair?
Well, a lot of it goes back to experience and knowing what the party is, what it can do, and what it can be. And I don't think you get that perspective unless you've been an active member of your unit. And frankly, I'm not saying that a small unit chairman wouldn't have the background ultimately to be chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia. But there's a big difference between a small unit and a larger unit with all the complexities that come into it. But really, the biggest difference, I think, now is I've got 18 months of experience. I understand now how the party operates, what its potential is, and we're heading into a very critical election this November. We've got the president on the ballot. We can see what will happen if the Democrats win the White House, somehow sweep the Senate and retain the majority in the House of Representatives. The country's going to be in a disaster almost immediately. So now is not the time to be changing horses as we head into battle, essentially. We've got to make sure that we're in a strong position to win Virginia for the president, pick up congressional seats, and unseat Mark Warner with Daniel Gate as our U.S. Senate nominee. So that's the biggest thing. And you don't get that in 30 days on the job training.
Exactly. No, we need to do that. I mean, this is a critical year. And this is also, I have a question. I'm not sure the answer to this. The redistricting commission that was that is going to be on the ballot in November. So correct? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I understand there may be some effort. The Democrats may be trying to undo that, perhaps in a special session this summer. So it's clearly something we got to keep an eye on.
And here's a question for you as party chairman: how do we steer this? Because back last year, when they didn't have the majority, they were all for, yes, let's have this independent, nonpartisan, redistricting commission. I have heard all across the board that they are backpedaling that. They don't want that anymore because they're in power now. So how do we as a party address that, bring it to the forefront, challenge Virginia 2021, who are the people that were all in favor of this? I don't know what their position is, but I think they're backpedaling too.
Well, I think it's really a function of, I think the Senate Democrats are still in support of it.
Okay.
It's just sort of those on the House of Delegates side that are doing most of the backpedaling. And I think we've been messaging on it. We clearly, when it was up for debate and discussion, the General Assembly session earlier this year, we were clearly messaging on it, pointing out the hypocrisy of the Democrats, which was basically a daily thing, and it continues to be regardless of the issue. But that was one of them. These are the folks that were saying a year ago how critical it was that this passed, and now once they got power, they wanted to back out of it. But we will continue to put the public pressure on individual members of the House of Delegates to start to waver on previous commitments to do that.
On the individual members. Okay, great. And as far as a targeted campaign, now Mike and some of the other members of SUVGOP remember when we defeated the meals tax in Fairfax County. That was a very targeted thing with the Republicans and a few other groups. Now, if we had some kind of statewide targeted message about that, if it comes to the ballot and we still don't think it's going to pass, there might be some value in that. Because
there definitely will be. And again, I think that's where we'll make sure as the campaigns head into the fall that while it clearly isn't within the purview of our congressional candidates, that clearly be impacted by whatever comes out of such. And so we'll make sure that our candidates for Congress are messaging that as well heading into November.
Right,
oh, that's
right.
great. That's great. You have, we're sort of coming to the 20-minute or maybe a little past the 20-minute mark, but this has been a very good conversation. Are there any other sort of topics we haven't hit that you'd like to raise?
Well, the only other one I think, and I probably could have answered it previously, but one of the things that we as a party need to do is restructure how we do our fundraising. I think we have become over the last decade too dependent on the Senate caucus, the House caucus, and some of our elected officials to fund the basic operations of the Republican Party of Virginia. And so last fall, I proposed that we actually, if we're going to turn the party and keep it as a grassroots-led, activist-led party, that the grassroots also ought to be able to fund the basic operations of the party. And so I put out something that's on the RPV website now, join, become a member, and it's basically pay $9 a month, which is a little over $100 a year. And if we could get 5,000 Republicans to do that, our basic infrastructure costs are covered. And therefore, we're not as dependent on the caucuses to fund us, which gives us greater autonomy as grassroots leaders in the party. It's one thing to say, hey, we got to do this in the caucus side, and in the next breath say, but hey, we also need you to fund some money so that we can keep the lights on. It just doesn't work. We need to be an independent, co-equal partner with the caucuses, and we do that by putting the grassroots in charge of not only the messaging, but also the funding. And so I've started that. I really want to push that because I think that gives us the ability to do some significant fundraising for specific candidates and programs as we move forward.
That's a great idea, because I think when people do that, they feel more engaged, and when they are directly, supporting it. I think there's a lot of, I hate the word ownership, but that is basically what it is. They're having an effect on it. I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Well, the thing I said, the best thing about it is if you pay your $9 a month, you have every right to complain every day.
No, that's true. That's true.
Twice of that. It's worth it right there, right?
That's right. That's right. No, that's great. That's great.
And we do always ask, we do always ask at the very end, we ask, after we take care of the business, what do you like to do for fun in your spare time? Is there anything that takes your mind off of all this?
There isn't as much spare time as there used to be. But eventually I'm going to fit back running into my work schedule. That's the one thing that I have sort of lost the time to do. And I'm looking forward to getting back to running again. I've run 14 marathons over the last 14
wow.
years, and so
Wow,
I'd love to pick that back up. But
fabulous.
That's
Yes,
really
as a runner
cool.
myself, I can so very much appreciate that. And well, you said at the very beginning you have 6 granddaughters.
I do.
Okay, I've got 1/3 of that right now. I've got 2. Hopefully we'll have some more.
That's right.
They are very wonderful too. So
Right.
It's
enjoy that.
you're going to want to keep running to get that exercise.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only way I can stay young.
Keep up with them.
Exactly. Keep up with them. No, that's great. Before we go, is there a website for your campaign, a Facebook site you'd like?
I've got there's a Chairman Jack Wilson Facebook page. And people can go there. I'm sending out emails on a regular basis. It's got contact information. So, but the Facebook page is probably the place to go. Again, I suspended my campaign when this whole pandemic started because I really needed to spend the time focusing on the party. A lot of stuff that needed to be done to get our congressional candidates nominated, our delegates to the convention. And so really now I'm just sort of relaunching as we head into the district or the state convention next month. So, but the Facebook page is probably the place to go. Chairman, Jack Wilson for Chairman Facebook page.
Jack Wilson for Chairman Facebook. Okay, great, excellent. All right. Well, again, Jack, this has been wonderful. Thank you for chatting with us. And we'll get hopefully some more information about your campaign out to people, and they can take a look at it.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much for having me. Enjoy the conversation.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. No, we appreciate it. It's always great to chat with you, and very, very enlightening discussion. Some great ideas and really great thoughts. So thank you for sharing them with us. We appreciate all of you out there who have been watching our podcasts. If you are interested in seeing all of our podcasts, you can visit our website, SUVGOP.com, and go to the drop-down menu, SUVGOP's podcasts. You can find them all there. We are posting our Zoom podcasts on our YouTube page, so you can find them there as well. And of course, we'll be sending them out through our SUVGOP emails. And if you're interested in signing up for those, please feel free to email us at SUVGOP@gmail.com. We'll add you to our mailing list, or you can visit our website and sign up there. So with that, we really appreciate you joining us on this edition of Think Suburbia, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks again, and thank you, Jack, for joining us.